All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Luke Menzel. I'm CEO of the Energy Efficiency Council, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, Further, Faster Together, Germany and Australia Working to Decarbonise Industry. I want to begin by acknowledging that I'm coming to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging, and indeed the Indigenous owners of the many lands from which you're all joining us today. Super excited to be with you today. This is the latest iteration in an ongoing collaboration between Australia and Germany on energy efficiency, fuel switching, decarbonisation, that I've been a part of for a number of years. I am the co-chair of the Energy Efficiency Sub-Working Group under the Australia-Germany Energy Partnership. That is a broader framework which is covering off all kinds of issues, all kinds of interesting stuff, ranging across climate policy. There's a stream that's focused on hydrogen. There's all kinds of stuff, exciting stuff happening as part of that partnership. But we're focused on the demand side bit of it, and that has produced a number of really exciting initiatives. We focused initially on buildings. We released the first Further Faster Together report a number of years ago that was looking at opportunities for knowledge sharing and collaboration between Australia and Germany when it came to energy efficiency and emissions reduction in buildings. That has had all kinds of results, the identification of the opportunities in that report, up to and including a pilot of the National Australian Built Environment Rating System in Germany, which is currently underway. It's a sign that these sorts of initiatives aren't just talk fests. There's actually a genuine interest on both sides in picking up some of these lessons and doing things on the ground. And so we have every hope that this latest effort on industry will be just as fruitful. We are covering not one, but two reports today. There is the scoping exercise that was conducted by the Energy Efficiency Council. We were requested to do this by the German government, funded by the German Climate Ministry, BMWK, to look at the opportunities for collaboration on industrial decarbonisation, which we're launching today. But part of that early scoping work identified a particular policy mechanism focused on energy efficiency networks. And there was a great deal of interest in what Germany has done in terms of creating communities of practice and knowledge sharing, in particular industrial communities over in Germany. A great deal of success on that front. And so very early in the process, that was identified as an area that deserves its own report. And so we didn't wait for our report to be done. There was also funding provided to Adelphi, one of the key partners that facilitates the partnership between Australia and Germany, and indeed the Fraunhofer Institute, which is will be known to many of you as one of the world's leading think tanks in this space. And that report, I'm not sure if it's being released today, but it's certainly being previewed today. So it's if not done, very close to done. We can find out from Miha when he joins us a little later on exactly what its status is. But that's very exciting as well. So we're going to be doing the broader, sharing the broader findings from our report that's being released today, but then also a deep dive and on the specific opportunities around energy efficiency networks. So there's a lot to get to. We have some fabulous panelists joining us from here in Australia and from Germany, and I'll introduce them all as it's their turn to join us. When we get to the back half of the webinar, we will be taking questions. So as you're listening to everyone's presentations, you know the drill. Drop your questions in the appropriate box on your screen, and we'll be working to get to as many of them as possible. It's not possible to get into all the detail in these very comprehensive reports, but we can unpack the bits that we don't get to that you're interested in based on those questions. So don't be shy on that front. I just want to, before we get into the first presentation, I want to acknowledge my co-chair of the Energy Efficiency Working Group, Suzanne Bollman from DNEF. our sibling organisation in Germany. It's been an incredibly fruitful partnership over the years. I want to also acknowledge Franziska Teichmann, who works at Adelphi to kind of provide the connective tissue between Australia and Germany. Huge amount of work that she does behind the scenes, often not getting the glory, but she certainly deserves a lot of the credit for this very productive relationship. And obviously the two departments that are the engine room of the relationship, the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water in Australia, and as I said, BMWK in Germany. So let's get into it. First up, we have my colleague, Amelia Jarrett, who is a policy advisor at the Energy Efficiency Council, and she is the lead author on the aforementioned report on industrial decarbonisation opportunities, and she's going to take you through some of the key findings. Welcome, Amelia.
Thanks, Luke. I'm just going to share some slides. I'll put you into a slideshow. Okay. Hopefully you can see the slides now. There's no response.
We sure can.
Okay, good. Okay, so the second in the Further Faster Together series, it focuses on industrial energy management and decarbonisation. And the report goes through various sections. It looks at the industrial landscape in Germany and Australia. It looks at various policies relating to industrial decarbonisation. Then we focus on energy management systems, energy efficiency networks, technology, and then the appendices have other areas that we couldn't get to in detail. So that also includes things like demand response. So there's a lot in the report. It's been developed over quite a while, over a year, from lots of workshops, and so we had to really focus on 3 things in detail. I will start off by going quickly through the industrial landscape in Germany and Australia, which probably won't be a surprise to many here. So Germany, 4th largest economy, whereas Australia is the 12th largest economy in the world. Germany has a large manufacturing industry, which is dominated by automotive, mechanical engineering, chemical, and electrical. Whereas in Australia, our manufacturing sector has declined since 1990, and mining and services have increased. But both countries are a net exporter of goods. Germany exporting a lot of motor vehicles, machinery, and chemical products, and Australia really focusing on raw materials as part of their exports. But manufacturing does comprise a significant proportion of energy consumption in both countries. You can see here that manufacturing is high for both. Mining is obviously higher for Australia, which aligns with the previous slide. And services is higher in Germany. In terms of the energy consumption in those industrial subsectors, obviously basic metals higher in Australia. We do have some similarities on these sectors which are considered to be easier to abate, such as food, paper and printing, which are not decarbonising at the rate required, indicating that there is some barriers to action in those sectors. So this was really the focus of the report, that we should focus on those areas that are considered easy to abate. So the harder to abate industries, sectors we know have particular policies. There's a lot of reports that are just for those sectors. So we thought that was well covered. There are links in the report to reports that deal with those harder to abate sectors. So you can find them in the report. But this report is really focusing on manufacturing industries where there is a presence in Germany and Australia. It's energy intensive, but there is access to mature technologies that can help decarbonisation, and where collaboration will be helpful in addressing these barriers. So in terms of targets, in both countries, Germany is slightly more ambitious than Australia in terms of emissions reductions. So 65% by 2030, Australia 43% 2030, net zero by 2045 for Germany, 2050 for Australia. In Germany, they do have legislated energy consumption targets. So this was introduced last year in the Energy Efficiency Act. And in Australia, we don't have anything that's legislated an equivalent legislation that reduces energy consumption. We do have policies in place to reduce emissions for the large emitters, the safeguard mechanism. So there are things discussed in the report where we have similarities. In Germany, 80% of electricity supplied to come from renewables 2030. In Australia, that's 82% in the NEM, so the National Energy Market on the east coast of Australia. Another similarity between both countries is climate-related financial disclosure has really become a big topic in both countries. Germany will be requiring reporting under the European legislation, and that will begin in 2025, but the rules are being applied already. In Australia, the legislation will come in 1st of January. The bill was just approved at the Senate last week, so it's looking good for that 1st of January 2025 date. And transition planning, which sort of links to the climate related financial disclosure, but also just net zero plans more generally for companies. In Germany, companies with an annual energy consumption of more than 2.5 gigawatt hours must create and publish feasible plans to reduce their energy use. So that is under the Energy Efficiency Act, which came in last year. And there has been a strong uptake to put those plans in place, the German government funding some of the cost of that plan. In Australia, there is currently no mandatory disclosure of transition plans. The Australian Sustainability Reporting Standards, which will be brought in through the climate-related financial disclosure, are still being finalised. In the draft, it was you would disclose the transition plan if you had one. So waiting to see what happens in the final stages of that. But transition planning is expected to become increasingly important because the reporting entities under that legislation will have to report on scope 3. So they'll want to see what their supply chain is doing to reduce their emissions. So one of the key things that we looked at were energy management systems. As more than 3/4 of emissions produced globally is related to energy, according to the IEA, reducing energy is crucial to reducing emissions. So energy management systems are recognized as an essential tool to do this. And when we talk about energy management systems, we are talking about a system which follows the plan, do, check, act approach. It's a systematic processes that drives continuous improvement. So we're not talking about software or anything like that. We're talking about policies, processes, plans, review, monitoring. So it's that kind of full management system. And the benefits are clearly set out in the report, but obviously it's designed to lead to energy savings. And you'll see that the Climate Group's latest report says 7% annual improvement, and also the link to emission savings and climate management. So an energy management systems can be adapted to support measuring and reducing and reporting emissions. So the German Business Initiative for Energy Efficiency, DENEF, which Luke mentioned, has prepared a plan which does actually map out how you can use an energy management system to create a climate management system. This is discussed in the report in more detail, but it's just that focus on how you use energy production to reduce emissions has really been already looked at in Germany, and that is something that we would recommend we also look at in Australia. And Germany, obviously, it has the highest number of certificates of ISO 50001 compliance. ISO 50001 is the global standard for energy, it's the ISO standard for energy management systems. It's not the only standard, and Germany does also encourage the use of other standards. And in Australia, it is not well taken up, but Germany does have the highest number. And it has been encouraged, formal recognition of an energy management system has been encouraged in Germany since 2009 through tax incentives, exemption from legislation, and it is now mandatory for companies with an annual energy consumption which exceeds 7.5 gigawatt hours per annum. So that again was brought in last year. So that's really sort of to drive that energy reduction, driving emissions reduction. In Australia, there are only 17 sites registered as being ISO 50001 compliant, but as I did mention, there may be companies in Australia that do have an energy management system or all of the elements of one. It's just not a formal energy management system. And support for implementing an energy management system has primarily been provided by states and territories. There hasn't been a sort of national push as as like in Germany with that legislation. So the first opportunity that the report sets out for German and Australian collaboration is this leveraging of energy management systems to achieve climate management goals. And the first step we think would be to build on the work done by DNF and consider the research that they've done and consider the appetite of government and industry in Australia to go through such an effort, because it would be a large effort to change the energy management system into a climate management system and get all of the relevant authorities to approve that is a good way forward. So the next step would be that workshop. The second section of the report talks about capability building, and this is talking about energy efficiency and action networks. As Luke mentioned, this was identified early as an area for collaboration. So Adelphi and Fraunhofer have both been working on a global guide in parallel to our report. So I'm going to let Miha talk about that. I'm not going to steal his thunder by talking about the advantages of those networks. But the opportunity that is identified in the report is that we should explore the viability of those networks in Australia. So the global guide, which is I think being released today, Miha will confirm, does set out the challenges, the success factors, and the impacts of those networks. So the next step would be a workshop to consider what do we already have in place in Australia? Could that be amended to follow the same model as in Germany to bring it into a sort of national formal state? So we think that would be a helpful next step. The third section talks about electrification technologies. So as I mentioned, we're focusing on those easier to abate sectors. So we're really looking at what can we do to help those decarbonise quickly. And the first one that we focus on is high efficiency motors, and then we look at heat pumps. So globally, motors are responsible for 40% of energy use, so a huge amount of energy use. And this has been recognised in Europe. So the European standards you can see here on the right, they apply to a wider scope of motors. It also clearly defines individual efficiency ratings required depending on the size of the load. And it mandates a higher efficiency level for the most commonly sized motor. So it's not really an opportunity for collaboration. It's just we think Australia should match the European legislation in relation to motors. For heat pumps, so fossil fuel is still used to create steam, hot water, and process heating in Australia and Germany. So you can see that from 1/6 to 1/3 of total energy consumption is used for that. The EU has recognised heat pumps are a key technology. The European Commission is working on an action plan to accelerate heat pump deployment in Germany, well, in Europe. We do have industrial heat pump systems for heating up to 95 degrees, and systems that can heat up to 110 degrees are becoming more common. But we do have barriers to uptake both in Australia and Germany. And actually, it's kind of from the research, it looks like we're facing the same barriers, including the lack of industry and installer knowledge of how to install these industrial heat pumps and their advantages, financial barriers. Gas boilers do last a long time, so you're not always wanting to replace them. Supply chain barriers, challenges of retrofitting heat pumps in the industrial setting, and lack of case studies which show that this can be done. So the next opportunity and the last opportunity for German-Australian collaboration was working together with Germany to strengthen this supply chain and accelerate the deployment of industrial heat pumps. So Germany is well placed to be a leading manufacturer of industrial heat pumps. Many manufacturers are already headquartered in Germany. So the next step for this opportunity would be an Australian delegation to Germany to connect with these manufacturers and hold a workshop to explore how do we build up this supply chain knowledge base to ensure that deployment of heat pumps in Australia and Germany is accelerated. So that was a very quick introduction to the report, which is now on the website. Natalie will share the link for me. So yeah, I'm looking forward to questions and also for you to read the report in full. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Amelia. I think that whistle-stop tour of those findings I think, just touches along the surface of just how much thinking went in through distilling all the different opportunities, and that's kind of the premise of the reports, right? You can say very easily, it's very easy to say that, oh, we should collaborate with Germany on industrial decarbonisation. What's much harder is to go, what does that mean? What are the things that are actually worth collaborating on? Because if you're not specific, then there's no obvious next action step. And so I think you've done a fantastic job distilling it down to like a small list of things where we think there's value, and that is something that is actionable. So congratulations on all of that work. I promise not one but two blockbuster reports this afternoon. So it is now my great pleasure to welcome Miha Jens Sturley, who's a senior manager at Adelphi, who collaborated with the Fraunhofer Institute. We also have the Fraunhofer Institute with us today. Lisa's going to be joining us a little bit later on, but Miha is with us to take us through this report on energy efficiency networks and what we're waiting for on the edge of the seat. Is this report being released today, Miha, or are we getting a preview today? What's its current status?
I hope it's getting released today. I'm trying to set it up on our side. Let's see if it's not today, it's in the next few days.
Excellent. I think that's good to know. All right, over to you, mate.
Thank you. Yeah, let me share the screen. Thank you for the introduction, Luke. Thank you for the opportunity to present this report, the Global Guide on Energy Efficiency Networks, Germany's Policy Instrument Design, Impacts and Success Factors. As mentioned, we have done that at Adelphi in collaboration with Fraunhofer EASY. Ms. Neusel is also here to participate then on the roundtable and Q&A session, and I will present the report. We don't have that much time, so I will jump straight into it. This is our quite short agenda. So what is an energy efficiency network? Then the policy instrument of Germany's initiative, Energy Efficiency and Climate Protection Networks. And then finally, insights, impacts, and lessons learned. So what is an energy efficiency network? Well, in German context, that tends to be a group of typically 5 to 15 companies. Maybe they belong to the same ownership group. Maybe they all belong to the same branch. Maybe they all sit in the same geographical area, or maybe they have no connection at all. They then get together and commit to cooperating on a voluntary, systematic, and non-bureaucratic basis over the course of 24 to 48 months. This is typically one phase, one life cycle of an energy efficiency network, but they might decide to do several one after the other if they realize they still have work to do and they like cooperating with each other. Yeah, the goal is to improve their energy efficiency and reduce their GHG emissions, greenhouse gas. First, they identify the potentials and set the savings target. Then they implement the measures that are necessary to achieve it. And then finally, they agree to a monitoring so that their work can be recorded, so that we get a sense of what all of the networks together have saved, and also to derive insights that are relevant for the further development of the policy instrument of energy efficiency networks. What does a typical life cycle of an energy efficiency network look like? So first, you have to acquire the companies who are going to participate, and the moderators from Germany, which are often the driving force behind it. They are, for example, energy consultants, energy auditors, but they decided to find the companies who are going to participate. They will tell you that this is the hardest part, finding the companies who are going to participate, convince them to put in this extra effort, extra time to be a part of an energy efficiency network. Then you have your first meetings with energy experts. Then you have an audit that's conducted at every company individually to see what the potential measures that can be implemented are. then every company will set their individual savings target. And then over the course of the next 1 to 3 years until the end of the runtime of the network, they will implement those measures, the companies. They will also meet to share their experience, share good practices, also challenge each other with their ambitions. Conduct workshops maybe with external experts. For example, there are a lot of topics where that are too specific for companies to have an actual expert within a company, especially if it's a small or medium-sized company. For example, steam use or compressed air. A lot of companies will use those processes based on steam or compressed air or whatever other specific topic, but they will not have in-house expertise. And an energy network is an opportunity to get an external expertise that they can profit from. And in the end, of course, there's the monitoring. Okay, now let's go to the policy instrument of Germany's initiative, Energy Efficiency and Climate Protection Network. So the idea of the energy networks goes back to the 1980s to Switzerland. And then in the early 2000s, it was first introduced into Germany at small scale, individual networks. Then we had a bit later two pilot projects in 2018 and in 2014. And then finally in 2015, the first phase of the energy efficiency network scaled up to the Germany's federal level was introduced. The first phase went from 2015 and 2020 and was also a key element of the National Action Plan on Energy Efficiency. The goals were to establish 500 networks by 2020, which were to save 75 petajoules of primary energy and 5 megatons of CO2. And then we are now already in the second phase from 2021 to 2025, which is part of the second NAPE, National Action Plan on Energy Efficiency. Scope has been expanded from strict energy efficiency networks to climate protection networks, to climate protection measures, which reduce GHG emissions without reducing the energy consumption. This can be done by electrification, as already mentioned by Emilia. Goals were a bit different this time around. 300 to 350 energy efficiency networks are to be established, which are to save 9 to 11 terawatt hours of final energy. So we have switched from petajoules and primary energy to terawatt hours and final energy, which I understand is a nod to the fact that the electrification should be a big, an important measure that the companies are to implement. Savings are, GHG savings are similar as in the first phase, but also given as a range. And there's for the first time extra incentives, material incentives for the participating companies. What does the governance structure look like? So first we have the two German ministries, Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action and the Federal Ministry for Environment, which give the initiative the political patronage as well as provide funding and incentives. Then we have the industry associations, which are the second key driver behind this initiative. From the start, from the get-go, they have been involved. For their role is basically to promote the energy efficiency topic within their members companies, but also they tend to have a pretty hands-on approach and are really trying to convince their companies to participate, and sometimes they will even be involved in funding individual networks. So really picking up the phone, calling company A, company B, company C, hey, we're trying to set up an energy efficiency network that will focus on this and this and this. Would you be interested in participating? And they've really been a key driver behind establishing networks. Then we have an instrument design that allows for diverse networks, because networks will be very diverse in terms of their sizes. So the number of companies participating, but also in terms of the size of the participating companies, from really small bakeries. We've had small bakeries participating, bakeries, and then small retail stores, but then also publicly owned conglomerates in Germany. We've had everything. They will also be very diverse in terms of their knowledge, the amount of focus and energy efficiency that they had done beforehand, and so on. And it is important that the basic design of the policy instrument allows for this diversity. It's important to set up ambitious but realistic goals, because this then drives everybody ahead to give a little bit of extra effort to achieve those goals. Administration is quite an important part of it, and it has been delegated to DENA, the German Energy Efficiency Agency. And of course, there's accompanying monitoring and research to provide insights into what has been done. All right, I think my time is running out, so I will keep it short with insights, impacts, and lessons learned. As mentioned, the initiative has a very broad footing. The networks, the companies participating in them, and the measures they implement have been extremely diverse. So we've had, up until now, over 2,500 companies participating, over 300 networks. These numbers refer to the networks that have been already monitored, so they have ended already, but the total number will be even higher than that. So over 300 networks, number of companies probably approaching 3,000, and the total number of measures reported has already surpassed 10,000. Then we have the various benefits which go beyond simply energy efficiency and energy and CO2 savings. For example, the whole topic of energy demand and energy efficiency in the company will get a lot more transparency. It will be talked about more in the company, including on the higher management level. If the company, for example, also has to fulfill the obligation of regular energy audits, as bigger companies in the European Union will have to, then this tends to become easier, because energy efficiency is something that you will be focusing on regularly anyway, as a part of an energy efficiency network. And also it helps companies recognize the opportunities to benefit from the funding programs on the German federal level, but also sometimes on the level of the states, because measures and possibilities to finance them will be discussed more regularly also with external experts. The companies who have participated in energy efficiency networks report a very high rate of satisfaction. For example, 94% would recommend participation to other companies. 83% say that the cost-benefit ratio was good or very good. And 74% will say that they are very or even extraordinarily satisfied with their participation on energy efficiency network. This brings me to the end. Thank you very much. And if there's any questions, Lisa and I will make.
Wonderful. Thank you, Miha, for that very comprehensive presentation. I'm sure that has sparked all kinds of questions in our audience as well as our panel. I will now invite Amelia to join us once again, but also invite our other two panelists, also from Germany, Lisa Nussel, who's an energy researcher at the Fraunhofer Institute, worked very closely with Miha on this report. And of course, Nick Palousis, Managing Director from 2xe, who is on the ground working with companies in Australia, and he has been invited to unpack for us how the things that perhaps have been a success in a German context might be translated here in Australia. I might start with you, Nick. I know you've had a sneak preview of this hot report that Miha and Lisa have put out there, as well as having the benefit of Miha now sharing the top level insights from it. What stood out to you, and do you think that this sort of idea could ever have any traction here in Australia?
No, thank you, Luke, and I really appreciate the time to speak with everyone today. And yeah, congratulations on both reports. Fascinating reads. I think what jumped out to me the most with the Energy Efficiency Networks report was the impact that a voluntary approach to collaboration, target setting, holding each other to account, the impact that has had. I think, and it's an interesting thing. Like I deal with a lot of companies across a wide range of different industry sectors on energy efficiency and carbon management, and maybe there's a perception that businesses are waiting for regulation to come through to mandate action to happen, whereas all it really takes is, well, without trying to sound too simplistic about it, but if you set up these collaborative networks where it's not just about sharing knowledge and insights, but confidence as well, and the confidence that there are a whole bunch of you got peers and your peers willing to set targets and willing to pursue opportunities to reduce energy consumption. And when there are challenges and issues, then you workshop them together in a network format, in that collaborative format. And I've seen that work in snippets in Australia when you've kind of got a group of 5 to 10 businesses wanting to look at electrification projects, for example, and they're all dealing with the same issue or similar issues. They don't want to make mistakes, but they want to swap notes and work through things together. And I think I've seen that work really well in a small context, but to see that summarized through the report that Adelphi and the Fraunhofer Institute have done on a larger countrywide scale over a number of years, that's a lot of good data points to show that that kind of approach works.
Miha, I can see you nodding along in the background there. It does seem like one of the big areas of success around the energy efficiency networks has been just that building of confidence and trust in the technology and that sharing of stories, and maybe just making some of this stuff normal, and kind of the sense that there's a community of people that are all engaging with it along the way. Is that fair?
Sure. So the companies will really be happy to communicate it externally to the target publics, target audiences, that they are putting extra effort in the topic of energy efficiency, which really helps make this topic a legitimate topic even inside of the company, because energy managers in Germany will often say that they know they have measures they could implement that would pay themselves back in five years, for example, which is great, but they're finding it difficult to sell those measures to their bosses, to the company leadership. And if energy efficiency gets such a positive connotation because everybody is proud to participate in an energy efficiency network, then they tend to have a bit of an easier job with that.
Right.
That plus what Nick has mentioned, they're really like different companies that are participating in the network, they hold each other to account. So one manager in one company A, can go to their boss and say, "Hey, company B has done that. Why aren't we working on this?" Yeah.
Peer pressure.
Well, I mean, I was going to say in Australia that we have this term. I don't know if you have it in Germany, but it's FOMO, fear of missing out. So someone else, stealing a march on you. So it's like, oh, they've got a shiny new heat pump. Where's my heat pump? Can be a factor as well. Lisa, keen to bring you in. To the degree, I know there's policymakers here in Australia that have been watching this work with interest and are really excited to read the report. If they're hearing this and going, oh, maybe this could, whether it's state at a federal level, maybe this could have some relevance in Australia. What are the sorts of things they should be thinking about as they're sort of exploring kind of formalising this as a kind of a process that could support businesses down under?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Good to be back and having this conversation. Indeed, in our report, we've identified several, I would call it success factors. So experience we have gained over the last decade with energy efficiency networks in Germany. Happy to share some of our lessons learned with you today, because there are so many stakeholders involved. I mean, those are policymakers, the companies, and overarching person who is managing the individual networks, and also the research or monitoring institutes. So I think overall what we've learned is, well, it's good to start small. So introduce the concept via a pilot phase. So we started with 30 networks and then scale it up. So I think actually it's now the network number 400, which was launched lately. So yeah, even higher. But what we've also learned is it's really important to adapt the concept to the local context. So in Germany, it is mainly an instrument for industrial companies, so addressing SMEs and non-SMEs, but mostly in the manufacturing sector as one big target group, I would say. But it's also really well suited for the tertiary sector, and also agricultural production could make sense, supermarkets, all those branches where cross-cutting technologies play an important role. Although, for example, companies in the primary production maybe have specific challenges, so it would not be suited for those probably, but I think the German, Australian industrial landscape are both really suited for this kind of concept. And yeah, you asked me on the more on the policymakers' perspective. I think what really stands out is this voluntary approach that was chosen in Germany. So instead of obliging companies to make savings, there's this close cooperation between the federal government and the industry associations, and there was a clear target set, but still it's a voluntary scheme somehow. And what is important for making this work is the ecosystem that must be provided by a policymaker. So that means there need to be certified energy auditors, there need to be multi-measure funding schemes addressing different energy efficiency activities of companies. We think that this helps to boost also the initiative in Germany. And exactly, maybe one last point from the more company perspective, what we see is a bit of a bottleneck is the recruitment phase. So companies are sometimes hesitant to sign a contract for such a network service lasting 2 to 4 years, because of course it's resource intensive, time consuming. But with all these good practice examples we've collected, we see this this positive cost benefit ratio that was achieved. I think we could promote the scheme quite well, and also the high satisfaction rates of former participants mirror that. So from a practical perspective, once you get the companies on board and spread the word, it was quite easily to run this initiative in a successful way.
Yep. I find it really interesting, that point you made about it. It's almost enabling connections into other elements of policy or programs, incentives and the like. And I think that's one of the things that, policymakers probably need to bear in mind, is that, the efficiency networks are existing in a very different policy context in Germany. It's not that there's no incentives for industrial decarbonisation in Australia. There are some, but it's probably not as rich a landscape as it is in Germany. So it's, I guess, thinking about the role of energy efficiency networks are kind of socialising some of this stuff. But once you get people excited, there's got to be the support there to help them on that journey, as well as the kind of the consultants and the advisors and the supply chains and the networks. It's kind of like a piece of the puzzle, but you couldn't sort of say, well, we'll put in place energy efficiency networks and then job done. We'll just, walk off into the sunset. It's kind of like one tool in the toolbox, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, totally true. And what maybe also is interesting that lately kind of a pool of energy experts was provided, like free of charge, I would say, for those companies active in a network. So this is also part of the initiative to provide like experience from other experts, like workshops and all that stuff. So that's maybe on top of the funding schemes, programs that are done from the federal government, right?
Yeah. The other thing that I kind of want to dig into, and there's other things to talk about in the other report as well, but just in terms of the energy efficiency networks, there's this like interesting tension or balance, maybe is a better way of putting it, between like a national framework with like clear kind of parameters, but then this adaptability to the particular circumstances of the local region or the businesses involved, that tailoring bit of it seems like it would be quite time intensive, like to require a bit of effort to make it really work and resonate. Whose job is that to kind of do the local tailoring? Because I know there's generally a lead consultant that is kind of like the ringmaster, if I could put it that way, of the efficiency network. Is it their job, or is it like where does that sit? Where does that tailoring piece sit? And Lisa or Miha, you might want to, either of you could jump in on that.
I can try my best. So, I think, as already Lisa mentioned, it's important to first start small, have a pilot project, get the first experience, and then basically do the management cycle, plan, do, check, act. After the pilot, you can see what things worked well, which were the things that maybe didn't work well and require adapting, and then scale it up one notch, right? But to be more specific, so who designed the policy instrument? It was the only the Federal Ministry of Economy and Climate Protection with the Industry Association. So they were the two players that got together first.
Yep.
And then, of course, they had other stakeholders at the table, energy consultants and probably individual companies as well. We, as the institutions doing the monitoring, we only came to the initiative later when the monitoring was when the minister decided they wanted to do a monitoring. But now we also sit at the table. So it's quite a broad circle of actors, of players who are basically talking to each other to improve the initiative, and also it's like really detailed rules from one cycle to the next, from one phase to the next. And there's an expectation that after the second phase of the energy efficiency of the initiative is finished, there will be a third one. And again, I'm sure some new elements will come to it. Yeah. I hope that answers the question.
No, that was great. So Nick, one of the themes that came through in our work in this space was kind of the interaction between energy management and climate management within businesses. And transition plans have been a really hot topic over the last couple of years, is that the practice in that area has arisen and continues to evolve. One of the really interesting pieces of work that we picked up was the report from DNF. It was sort of talking about, and Amelia spoke to this, the evolution of energy management systems into climate management systems. Big piece of work to do that, but sort of interesting where, given like what some of the strategic drivers for businesses are these days. They're thinking about emissions reduction. They're not necessarily thinking about energy management, even though energy management is probably the critical pathway for many businesses to an emissions reduction outcome. What's your reflection on the kind of the interaction between those two things and what you're seeing out on the field?
I'm laughing because like I was at a climate governance forum last Friday, and a whole bunch of directors there, and one of the apparent insights was, well, we need to put a business case behind this action on climate. It's like, yeah, really, you've come to that conclusion now, obviously. And one of the other comment, which I found interesting, coming from a whole bunch of just folks at senior levels within an organization or within organizations. The other sort of insight was, which I thought was an obvious one, but I think quite pertinent, was with these climate-related financial disclosures, which is kind of when it comes to sort of regulation for industrial carbonisation, this is kind of a bit of a proxy, in my opinion. Like when you start talking about these disclosures, is you cannot disclose something you haven't done. You can only disclose what you have done. So you can only disclose those actions to decarbonise. So to me, and the energy efficiency is like the most practical thing you can do to demonstrate decarbonisation. It's, it makes good business sense. So it ticks all the business drivers. There are known things you can do. There's a business case around it. There are, for a lot of energy efficiency projects, if you're if it's more than six, if the payback's more than 6 years, you're kind of doing it wrong. There's a whole bunch of really good business drivers behind energy efficiency as a foundational part of a company's response to climate-related financial disclosures, as well as obviously other core business drivers beyond that. So obviously there is an absolute clear link between energy efficiency and climate management. I think in the last couple of years, a lot of businesses have just jumped straight to, well, the grid's going to decarbonise, right? So what's the point of energy efficiency from a carbon perspective when the grid's just going to get greener and greener? Well, the latest evidence shows, that decarbonisation projections kind of been potentially downgraded because of either lack of investment, or policy uncertainty, a whole bunch of other sort of reasons. So the surefire way of addressing carbon from a transition risk perspective is energy efficiency. Always has, always will be. Yes, is it as kind of as glossy and as sexy as battery storage and solar? No. Does it need to be? No. Why? Because good business practice isn't necessarily sexy. It's just makes sense. And energy efficiency is like the number one thing you could do to run a good business. So ticks all those boxes.
Yeah, 100%. Another aspect of the report, Amelia, that you sort of identified was like the opportunity around electrification for low temperature process heat. Really interesting from an Australian perspective that actually Germany's kind of like facing a lot of really similar challenges to Australia. It's not like there's, it's been solved in Germany and we can learn those lessons. It seems like there's a lot of inertia in industry, right, around the world. But you also noted that one thing that Germany does have that Australia doesn't have is kind of like a lot of expertise around the manufacture of heat pumps, and that potentially being something that we can leverage it off. In terms of the workshop that has been recommended in the report, that would sort of bring together Australian and German experts, what are some of the key questions that you think need to be unpacked to kind of work out the next concrete steps for collaboration so that we can accelerate activity in that space?
Yes, I think it would be sharing how both countries are looking to address those barriers. We know that there are some case studies of successful use of heat pumps, but they're just not well known. How Germany and Australia plan to upskill workforce, manufacturing in Germany, how is that being encouraged? What is the EU action plan gonna do for that? Anything. So Germany currently is sort of lagging behind the rest of Europe, which I was quite surprised about in terms of heat pump deployment. They have had sort of residential heat pump deployment, but on the industrial side, it was actually I was expecting it to be a huge success story, but not quite yet, it seems. So I think there are common barriers to discuss. Testing those heat pumps in some of retrofitting them in Australia, using Australia as a kind of test case for a lot of these heat pumps, and also just learning from each other in terms of those key things, skilling the installers, knowledge sharing amongst the industry. I know that there are a lot of businesses, we see this at our conferences and things, that are interested in heat pump, but they just want to know that it's tested, that it works. So getting those case studies and that experience, and then also getting that supply chain, so the manufacturing of reliable equipment, and then testing it in Australia. That would be the kind of key things that I would test at that workshop, how to explore those further.
Lisa or Mihar, I don't know if there's to bring the two conversations together, whether there's sort of early signs that the energy efficiency networks are supporting sort of planning around some of this asset replacement and making sure that when assets, because a lot of the challenge in these contexts, in these industrial contexts, is catching the wave of asset replacement. There's a cycle and there's sunk cost, and so having the right plan for moving to a a technology that's compatible with net zero is half the battle. Are you seeing through your research that those plans are being put in place? And while I just wonder if there's a bit of a lag because, you know, all this expertise is being created, all these conversations are being had, but just because you're in an energy efficiency network for 3 or 4 years or 5 years or whatever it is, like if the boiler is end of life in 10 years, like it's not necessarily going to be showing up in the data. Is that something that could be taking place in Germany? I threw that to both of you, but one of you needs.
Lisa, if you want to go ahead.
Oh, I can just start. I mean, I think what is done in the initiative or in a network is a potential analysis. So all these kind of technologies you raised are discussed in there. So even, and we see that even companies who already have like energy management systems, they still join networks. So that brings me to the point that even best-in-class companies sometimes are trapped or need some advice what to do first. And I think so this also touches on the heat pump discussion as well. Yeah. I don't know, Mia, if you want to add something on that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to small companies and small measures, I think participating in an energy network would really be an accelerator of doing stuff that would have made sense anyway, but maybe you weren't aware of it as a company. If you are a big company, if you're a steel producer, and your blast furnace has, I don't know, is approaching the end of its life cycle, you will have known that long before, right? So it's a bit of both. You have companies who really benefit from participating in an energy efficiency network, and then you have companies who have put so much effort into energy efficiency and climate protection as it is, right? And if those companies participate in an energy efficiency network, a lot of times we've had a company who didn't implement one single measure, but they said, we have all this knowledge, we want to share it with smaller companies, obviously not their competition.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of both. And I think that's okay. Having companies who know they won't advance their efforts by simply participating because they had been doing it before, but they want to multiply what they've been doing.
Wonderful.
So it's a bit of both.
That's a great note to end on. We're at time. Thank you all, Miha, Nick, Lisa, and Amelia, for really fun discussion. There's so much more to unpack. So our report is up on the website. There's a link in the webinar chat. Miha, you're tapping away on the interwebs, getting your report up, and we'll certainly be sure to share that link with everybody that is registered for this webinar as soon as it's available. We'll do a follow-up email with all the links. Yes, looking forward to continuing the collaboration and hopefully in 2 or 3 years we'll be able to look back as we can in the building space and see the better connective tissue and the collaboration that has resulted from all of your hard work, Lisa and Miha and Amelia. So thanks for being with us, and thank you to the department here in Australia, Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water, for their support for this partnership, and specifically the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action for support for these reports. Again, acknowledging Susan over in Germany from DNF, hoping to be in the same country with you sometime soon, my esteemed co-chair. We'll continue fighting the good fight, and I guess, Amelia, we got to decide which sector is next, right? Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good day.
Thank you.